What is going on, football fans? Today I wanted to make a quick profile video on one of my favorite players and the guy that I think is the most inspiring story from this year's camp with the New York Giants, and that's the rookie Corey Ballentine. And there's a lot to go over. This guy, what a story this has been. He, of course, went to a Division II school, but before we get into all of that, we'll go back to his beginnings. He was not even born in this country, actually. He was born in Jamaica, not Jamaica, Queens, the Jamaica outside of the country where you go on vacation. And, he came here when he was 6 years old, and he always was a tremendous athlete. And that's why he went to college for both track and football. Now, when he got to college in D2 Washburn, he almost quit football his freshman season. He thought about doing it and just concentrating on track, but he was told not to, and he continued to play football, in which he played great in special teams and eventually built up his play as a cornerback to the point where he won Division II Player of the Year for defense, I think it was, or maybe a secondary player. It wasn't like D2 overall, but he won an award. I think it was for the best player in the secondary in Division II football last year, and he had a great year for Washburn, which is why he even got noticed at all. It's very hard for a Division II football player to get drafted. I mean, when you think about it, there's about 220 people that get drafted in the NFL draft. I mean, think about all the players in all these huge schools. For a D2 player to even get drafted is a huge accomplishment in itself. And there's a reason he got drafted. It's because of all of his physical traits. I mean, he's very fast. He ran a 4.45 40, I think it was at the combine. Might have been 4.47. He had a great vertical leap at 39.5. His arms are extremely long, and that is what a lot of the scouts say about him. When you read some of the positive things that are said about this guy going into the draft, they said he was a high-character guy. He was great in both the classroom and on the football field as a leader and a man of intelligence. His arms dangle like ivy vines, one scout said, because he has such long arms, which is a huge tool to have as a cornerback. Of course, when you're doing bump and run coverage, you're trying to pick off a pass, it's always a huge advantage to have long arms. He uses his length and play and strength as disruptive tools when he's in press coverage. So he has all the tools you could possibly want from a physical standpoint. Now, of course, what you have to worry about is he played in D2. He did, not near the level of a competition like a guy like DeAndre Baker faced, for example. He's also, I think, could potentially contribute in the special teams. He was returning kicks for the Giants in the first preseason game. But before we even get into all that, we're going to go all the way back to the draft. When the Giants took this guy in the 6th round. When the Giants took Ballentine in the 6th round, not that I knew anything about this kid. I didn't, even though he was projected by some to go in the 4th or 5th round. I didn't understand it. Because they had already taken Baker in the 1st. They had taken Julian Love in the 4th. They had taken 2 cornerbacks already. And I thought they should have filled other holes, whether it be the offensive line, whether it be linebacker, safety, whatever. I thought corner at that point in time in the draft was one of the least of our concerns. I thought we could have filled other holes. But Ballentine has been a standout. And before he even got the opportunity, because a lot of times a 6th-round pick doesn't even crack the roster. So it was still a very long shot to even make the Giants after the draft. That same night, or hours after, I think it was the next morning, very early, him and his friend got shot. His friend, unfortunately, passed away, which is a horrible story. Ballentine, fortunately for him, was able to survive, and he didn't sustain any serious injuries, and he was on the field by the time mandatory minicamps came around. And he's been a great presence ever since. And what people said about his high character and leadership really shows in some of the things that I have read. When he got to camp, he didn't even bring his cell phone. He wanted no distractions. He wanted to be focused strictly on football, and he's been dedicated, and it has shown on the field. You've heard countless times in the training camp reports that he's really stood out, that he's really showing how talented this guy could potentially be, to the point where today he was getting first-team reps at the cornerback position. This is like a Hollywood script. Now, granted, I know DeAndre Baker went down with an injury, and Sam Beal's out, but he's getting an opportunity to play with the first team, a guy that many thought would probably never even dream of playing in the NFL. The guy gets shot the day he's drafted, and now he's getting first-team reps. Not to mention, the first preseason game he plays in, he plays out of his mind. He's returning kicks. He had one really good return when he returned it from like 9 or 10 yards deep. He brought it back out to about the 30. But his coverage was great. Of course, he got called for that pass interference that I thought was a little ticky-tack, but when they reviewed it, they called him for it for holding the guy's arms, but still displayed great technique when he turned his head and went up for the ball, and then he later intercepted a pass in a very similar situation. And I love what I'm hearing about this kid, and it's a guy I'm really rooting for on the New York Giants, and a guy I really want to see succeed, because he's a high-character guy, he's a hard worker, and he's been through a ton. And it's a guy it's impossible not to root for. And I hope he gets an opportunity with the Giants. And I think he's going to. Hopefully DeAndre Baker's not hurt. Obviously, I want DeAndre Baker is my favorite player in this year's draft, and we're going to find out about that more tomorrow. But if he is, Ballentine is definitely going to get the call, I think. I think he's going to get an opportunity, and hopefully he makes the most out of it. This guy is a really hard worker, and he has all the tools you could want. Like I said, very long arms, very fast, has a high vertical leap, needs to work on some things, of course. He's still a bit of a project, but you've definitely seen it, and he stood out in both the practices and the games. And the Giants obviously saw something as well. He also had a great senior game, which is why he was drafted by the New York Giants. So we'll have to wait and see, but I just want to get a story because to me, you can make a movie out of this. I mean, this guy gets shot, and now he's taking first-team reps with the New York Giants, 2 or 3 months later. Just crazy stuff, guys, and I'm rooting for this guy. I really am. And as always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.